Last year I built something and fulfilled a childhood ambition, but I followed somebody else's plans to build it. Now I wanted to see if I could design a second project on my own from scratch. I wanted to build something completely different, and after some time cogitating, I knew what I wanted to achieve. The problem was, I had absolutely no idea whatsoever how I could get it to work. So I thought about it, and thought about it, and thought about it some more, until suddenly everything became clear to me. I typed out my ideas and started the design work in my computer, drawing everything by hand. Once the design work was complete, I printed out my plans and instructions on paper, and then rested until daylight. Now I have my plans printed out, I can start construction, and for that I need some wood. But not just any old rubbish. Traditionally the wood of choice for this kind of project is Baltic birch plywood. It's quite difficult to get hold of due to demand, and it's obvious why when compared to standard plywood. Okay, now I have my wood, I can start cutting it up. But first I need to get changed. Actually, if you believe everything you read, I should be wearing all this protective equipment. Just for the purposes of this film though, I'm not going to wear any of this. Right, I have my plans and my wood. But how exactly do I go about making the pieces I need for my project? This is the really clever bit. I've cut out one part of my plan and using aerosol glue I coat the back of it and stick it to the piece of wood I want to use. Simple. Now I can start work on this piece by drilling some holes. I start by centre punching where I need to drill, following the marks I have made on the plan. Then, over at the pillar drill, I drill a hole from the front of the wood using a special drill bit called a brad point. This type of drill bit allows me to drill accurately from both sides of the wood, creating a very clean hole. And I repeat this for all the holes I need in this piece of wood. Okay. All my holes are drilled and I now have something that resembles a tea bag. But I've got to give it a little shape, and for that I need to use my scroll saw. Using my scroll saw, I carefully cut around the outside of my design. But I don't cut right up to the line, just around the outside edge. This piece of wood is about half finished, but I'm going to put it on one side for now and work on something different. My project needs nearly 40 different pieces of wood, but it also requires more than 75 individual pieces of brass to make it work. I need mainly rods and tubes of various lengths, and I'm going to make one of them now. Firstly, I mark where to cut the rod before cutting it roughly with my Dremel multi-tool. The heavy-duty disc sander makes light work of squaring off the rod at the correct length. I then insert the rod into the Dremel and use fine abrasive paper followed by a polishing compound to buff it up to a nice shine. Finally, I wallop the end of my beautifully finished piece of brass with a rather large hammer. Here is my finished rod and a miniature ball bearing, one of many I need for my project. The hammering ensures the bearing doesn't fall off the end of the rod. Well, I think I've done enough work for today, but there's plenty more to do tomorrow. Remember this, I've done a little more work on it since yesterday and drilled some holes into the edge of the wood. And I've also finished cutting it out and smoothed down the rough edges left by the scroll saw. It's nearly finished. Because I no longer need the paper template I glued to this piece of wood, I carefully remove it with the aid of a hot air gun. If you can smell burning, that'll be my fingers. I've decided I want a darker finish to my project, so I carefully stain all visible areas of the wood with an Indian rosewood dye before leaving it to dry. Okay, now I have the other 100 or so pieces to make. I might be some time. Right, I've fabricated all the wooden components and brassware I need to complete my project. Most of the pieces are laid out here, including this piece. It's actually a frame upon which most of these other components are fastened. All I need to do now is put it together and see if it works. Finished. Did you guess what I was building? Following the application of a few coats of shellac on the frame and some minor adjustments to the mechanism, this clock looks good and keeps time very accurately. But why does it look so complicated when surely it could have been much simpler in design? After all, a handful of gears or wheels could have achieved the same result. Or could they? All the levers, pivots, cams and rods I've designed and built into this clock do one thing. They force the mechanism to jump from one hour to the next instead of moving slowly in a continuous fashion like a traditional clock. At first glance, the time shown on the clock face might be seen to be almost 9 o'clock, whereas in fact it is 10 o'clock. This is a jump hour clock. I thoroughly enjoyed designing and building this clock, and I learned some useful new techniques along the way. But now I'm off to design something far less sedate.